Welcome to BibleTelling, Story of the Week. We're in a series called The Lesser Known Stories of the Old Testament. This story today and the next few will actually come from a period of time in Israel called the time of the Judges. It's after Joshua brought them into the land and conquered the land, and before they actually got a king. It spans about 400 years. But enough of that. Enjoy the first story, and then I'll meet you on the other side. This first story is told by a good friend of mine, Hawkins Williams. Enjoy the story.
Ehud, the left-handed judge. The people of God lived in a pagan land, and they began to worship the pagan gods of that land. They even gave their children over to the people of that land in marriage. This caused the Lord to become very angry with them, and he caused them to be in service to that land for 8 years. After a while, the people of God cried out to the Lord. He looked down upon them and forgave them. For 40 years they had peace. But once again, the people of God sinned against him. And he caused them to be in service this time for 18 years. For 18 long years, the people of God suffered. They cried out to God once again, and the Lord their God forgave them of their sin. This time, he chose a man by the name of Ehud to bring them out. Ehud had called the people together because in that land, every year there was a time to bring gifts to the king. Now when the people of God was gathering the gifts, Ehud made a short sword, a two-edged sword. Because he was left-handed, he placed the sword underneath his clothes on the right side, right above his thigh. Now when the people came, they presented their gifts to the king. Now this king was a really large man. After they had presented the gifts to the king sent them out. Now the king always had his guards with him. The people went away, and Ehud, he himself, he went back to the king. He spoke to the king and he said, I have a special message from God just for you. Well, the king put his hand up and say no more. He sent his guards away. The two men went up into a cool place, up into an apartment. They sat down and began to visit. Then Ehud spoke again. He said, I have this special message from the Lord for you. Well, the king was so excited, he got up and went over to where Ehud was sitting. And as he did, Ehud pulled out the sword and he stabbed the king. But the king was so large, the fat sucked the sword all the way in and he couldn't pull it out. Slowly, the king fell to the ground and died. Ehud realized now he needed to make his escape. He left the room, he closed the door and he locked it. Well, the palace guards were standing outside just a ways from the door. When they saw Ehud leave, they thought, we should go and serve our king. But when they got to the door, they found that it was locked. All this time, Ehud was making his way across the Jordan River, up into a mountain. Back at the palace, they waited patiently, but the king didn't come out. So they took a key and they unlocked the door. When they opened it, they saw their king dead on the floor. It was about this time that Ehud had reached a special place on the mountain and he blew a trumpet, and the people of God came down and they were on their way down to do battle with the king's men. Now the king had 10,000 brave, strong men. They crossed the river and did battle with them. That day, the people of God had victory over those men. And for 80 years, the people of God had peace.
Well, Ehud, the left-handed judge. I hope you enjoyed that story. We want to encourage you to come to the website, BibleTelling.org. And there you'll be able to respond to the story. Tell us what you think of it. Possibly write a devotional. Give us a key passage of Scripture that kind of illustrates this entire story. Well, I trust that you are enjoying these sets of stories and that you go to the website and you're able to not only contribute something yourself, but also read what other people have done. Well, until next week, when we continue on with lesser known stories of the Old Testament, Bible telling, story of the week.
Well, I understand a lot more about the Old Testament now that I understand and know the stories. It has really caused me to think a great deal about what's actually happening at that time in history with the people of God. The Old Testament and the New Testament. I'm fascinated a little bit more about the Old Testament now because I was a New Testament reader. But now that I know more stories in the Old Testament, it's really got me excited. I've used BibleTelling in a way of reaching out to people and sharing the stories with them, and also volunteer at several places here in town. Well, my church has really taken off with BibleTelling. We've been telling stories for a full year and a half now. We've had Christmas programs, the Easter programs, hour-long programs. The people in the church are so excited, and the Bible tellers now are even reaching out.